And we should focus on al-Qaeda, the Taliban, the Islamic Republic of Iran, because they're the ones who are saying death to America.
Yeah. Steve?
Agree with you at all.
No,
I look.
No, that's good. Listen,
we ought to talk about Afghanistan.
I got to say, it's great to find common ground. And one thing I noticed about the Paul Ryan, the very well done town hall that CNN did with Paul Ryan, is people were having a civil debate, and there's not enough of that in this country. Instead, you have what you have in Charlottesville. You have people pulling down statues. You have people
Cliff, with all due respect,
out.
it sounds like the President of the United States should be listening to your advice, because he's the one. I mean, he is a big part of the divide, the separation.
No.
He may say that he wants people to come together, but his words reflect something else.
And Don, it's so important
Look,
that we are
I totally
able
agree that he did not do it. Let me just say this, Anna, I'll let you go. Just to respond to Don. Don, if you're saying that he did a bad job on Tuesday, particularly on Tuesday, when he was impromptu and he said whatever popped into his mind, I totally agree with you. And
I didn't, by the way, think as an American, I didn't think it was necessary for him to bring that into the Afghanistan speech tonight as well. I didn't think he should have brought Charlottesville into that. If he wanted to speak to the nation about Charlottesville and his comments, he should have spoken to the nation about Charlottesville and not muddled it by putting it into a speech about Afghanistan. That's what I thought as an American.
Listen, and your advice, my advice, Anna's advice, perhaps he's sitting there listening to all of it, and maybe he'll take the best of it.
Go ahead, Anna.
First of all, I think it was fine for him to bring up Charlottesville, because the country needs to hear more from him, because he has bungled it so, he has screwed it up, he hasn't messed it up, he has been a complete and absolute failure. How hard can it be to condemn neo-Nazis, for God's sakes? This is not complicated math. This is something that should be morally simple. It is not moral ambiguity, it is moral deficiency, it is lacking morality. But I think it is really important that we all agree that it is just as much of a priority to condemn foreign terrorism as it is to condemn domestic terrorism. Both to destroy America. Both want to destroy American values. Both are costing American lives. Both are instilling fear and terror in American citizens, and we cannot allow that. So that's what I want from the President of the United States, a very strong, unequivocal condemnation of terrorists, foreign and domestic.
Yeah, well, Dan, I mean, I had to disagree with you a little bit. Well, not so much, because I think that my issue is that this issue of race and what we're dealing with right now should be prioritized just as much as the issue in Afghanistan, because we have people out on the streets now who are fighting in our very own country. Not that as many lives are being taken as in a war in Afghanistan, but this should be a priority for the president, especially after having bungled it by so many people's estimation, that he should specifically address this, and as I said, not put it somewhere in the beginning, the middle of an end of a speech that's about a war somewhere else. Jason, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's great that the president brought it up. I just fundamentally disagree with you. I actually agree with Anna on this point, that it's good that we're hearing from the president on this.
I didn't say I didn't want to hear from him. I just said if he wanted to speak about this, he could have said, I'm going to address the nation regarding Charlottesville and race. And he could have addressed the nation regarding Charlottesville and race. He could come here and hold a town hall. He can give a speech about it. But he didn't. He addressed the nation about Afghanistan and then snuck something in there and didn't even mention Charlottesville, didn't even mention the words. He just alluded to it. That's not a forthcoming
I wouldn't
approach.
say that he snuck it in there. I mean, he brought it up right off the top. But I think, look,
but he didn't even mention Charlottesville.
But Don,
if you were just just sort of a casual listener, maybe you knew what he was talking about, maybe you didn't. But if he came out and said, I want to address what I said and what actually happened in Charlottesville, because there's so many issues around it and so many people maybe misunderstood what I said, and I want to make it perfectly clear.
Don,
that didn't happen. Speech.
There is not one person who was watching that speech at home that didn't know what the president was referring to. Look, I think obviously we have serious race issues in our country, and I think that if President Trump, as often as he wants to come out and talk about this and address it, I think that's good. And I think as he wants to continue to talk about the education differences, how certain communities have been left behind, how communities have been left behind on jobs and wage growth, as well as what we've seen from some of these bigotry and hate groups where there's absolutely no place for. Good for President Trump for bringing up and speaking to.
But he didn't do it. He didn't address that tonight. He gave two or three sentences regarding that.
But good
it wasn't
for,
a clear.
Good for
fine,
him
that's
for
good. He
bringing
brought it up. But if he really wants to talk about it, then he should really talk about it. He's taken no questions and answers about it. No one from the White House has spoken since he gave his last speech. He's been tweeting about it. He has not been clear on this particular issue. You cannot sit here and tell me that, Jason.
Don, and I hope he brings it up again tomorrow in Phoenix. I think it's great when President Trump is bringing this up. We're just going to have to agree to disagree. I think we should be giving him credit where credit is due when he brings this topic up.
Again, I think he brought it up. I think he deserves credit there for bringing it up. But if he's going to do it, then do it. And don't, again, do it in a backhanded manner where he's trying to sneak something in order to change the subject.
I guess what I would say on that is I don't think there has to be a negative context to him bringing it up. I think the fact that he brought it up is good, and I think there are a lot of opportunities for him to bring it up. And so, again, good for him.
There's no negative context. There's no negative because he comes out and addresses it. That would be positive if he came out and addressed it.
But that's why I was saying that's why I was saying it was positive that he brought it up and addressed it at the very beginning of the speech. But again, the rest of the Afghanistan speech, by the way, which we didn't get a chance to get into as much.
We've got a lot. We've got a lot to talk about.
Good, we can dive into it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it. I loved it. So let's go on. Let's talk now about the poll numbers, right, in response to the Charlottesville speech. Because, Steve, only 28% of Americans approve of the president's response to Charlottesville, and that's according to a new Washington Post ABC News poll. 56% disapprove. What do those numbers tell you?
Well, they tell me that the president continues to struggle and have a challenge with the American people on his response. Look, the president, I don't think, is all that focused on the poll numbers of the day, but we just heard from Paul Ryan. He's the guy who looks at these numbers, and he has to worry. He is going into a midterm election. Whether the Republicans will lose the majority remains to be seen, but I'll tell you what, this is going to be the most competitive midterm election since 2010 when the Republicans took the majority from the Democrats. And so these poll numbers and this steady erosion of support for the Republican brand, it's just perilous for Paul Ryan's majority. They're the ones who are focusing on this, and they're the ones who have the most to lose as we go forward over the next 17 months.
Cliff, the president also announced a long-awaited strategy for the U.S. in Afghanistan tonight, and he is asking the nation to trust his leadership at a time when his competence and moral authority are in question as well. How do you think he did tonight?
I think he did a pretty good job overall tonight. I think look, I think it was difficult for him. There are going to be people on the right, isolationists, who are not going to like what he had to say tonight. And he discussed that. He said, look, I thought as a candidate that maybe we just would abandon the entire enterprise in Afghanistan. I think he realizes that for the U.S., after all these years, to be defeated on the battlefield by the Taliban and by al-Qaeda is not a good idea, and he doesn't want that to happen. And he introduced several new ideas he introduced a strategy. I'm not going to tell you it's the best strategy. I don't know that. It gives a lot more authority to his commanders in the field, on the battlefield. I think that's a good thing. I think a president shouldn't be sitting there with a map trying to figure out how to run these battles. Among the things he did, for example, that are new, he said there will be no safe havens anymore in Pakistan. You can't be like chasing Bonnie and Clyde state line and then turning around and going home. And we've been doing that for years, and as a result, al-Qaeda and Taliban leadership can live in western Pakistan and feel relatively safe. He said that he was going to continue with this effort, not on the basis of time, saying 6 months, don't worry, we're going to get out, but withdrawal will be conditions-based when the enemy is no longer able to take over and say that they've defeated the United States, which would be catastrophic in many ways. He's going to change the rules of engagement and use all instruments of American policy, economic, diplomatic, and other. These are significant changes. Are they going to be enough? I can't really tell you that, but I think it's important that he said we're not going to lose there. We're going to do what we have to do to make sure that the Taliban and al-Qaeda do not defeat us. I think it's important to put this in a larger global strategy. We're fighting a lot of various forms of jihadists. That's what they call themselves. And this is going to be a long war. It's going to be an uncomfortable war. We're not going to win it anytime soon. But we could lose it very soon if we're not careful. And that would be catastrophic.
Steve.